Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It is Wednesday. Let's take a look at some alts for what could go wrong Wednesday. Got to talk about BTC for half a second here. Flows on the ETFs are rising once again. We may have hit record inflows today. We'll see. Based on volume, we should see a pretty considerable amount of inflows either today or tomorrow. IBIT hitting over 3 billion, I think, in volume on the day. Price on the Bitcoin side exploding to almost all-time highs. Honestly, we got pretty close to 64. We hit the TA targets for the flag, which when you draw this stuff, I never assume anything, and I certainly don't assume we're going to get there in a day, but it's one of the reasons why on a breakout trade, if you have conviction on direction and eventual target, that you shouldn't feel bad about adding at 53, 54, 55, right? If the target is 60 plus, that's a pretty good place to keep buying, right? If you miss 51.5 or whatever this was. But this is part of the argument for the breakout trade in the first place. You're not sitting there waiting for potentially a move lower. You're waiting for confirmation, right? You just have to have that historical playbook of what's happened. I mean, we just had a similar breakout where we hit the target fairly quickly, but always good to refresh your memory what bullishness can feel like. We also hit the megaphone target based on that measured move, and we hit the next yearly pivot at the R2. The yearly pivot above this is at 80. I expect Bitcoin to probably consolidate in this zone, probably take a breather. It depends if we continue to see flows. You know, if we see another 500 million today, 750 million the day after, things could get crazy. But in the moment, this would be a logical place for things to just chill out for a little bit. Lower time frames, we've got this long-legged doji indecision candle. So what we want to see would be this current candle. By the time this video you watch it, it's probably finished. But this current 4-hour needs to be basically above the wick of the last candle to be certain that we're going higher. Otherwise, there's a pretty high chance that this just consolidates or has a little bit of a reversal. One of the reasons price reversed a little bit today at 64 was because Coinbase, the exchange, went down. I believe the price action for Bitcoin happened after the exchange went down. So if the exchange hadn't gone down, maybe we would have still held that level. I don't know. Definitely a interesting sentiment gauge based on where we're at in the cycle historically. There are bots that follow this. This is the Coinbase app rank bot in the App Store. Still quite low, at least as of this morning. We'll see what that looks like tomorrow. But we've got Brian Armstrong saying they had a 10x surge in traffic exceeding testing. And Hisaka rightfully saying, look, plenty of other exchanges do just fine. Brian knows this is a bad moment for them as an exchange. They obviously don't want their exchange going down. Not much you can do when you're basically getting DDoSed, right? So I don't have sympathy for them because they need to be able to handle this if they want to be hanging out with the big boys. But a good sign that people are definitely coming back slowly but surely here to the exchanges, trading, potentially wiring money, you know, whatever, right? It's a sentiment indicator that people are coming back for sure. I got 2 texts from friends and relatives saying, what the hell, my Coinbase balance is 0. Did they get hacked? You know, that stuff can't happen. So they definitely need to figure out what went wrong there. They weren't hacked, to be clear, but people who don't know better assume the worst, right? There's also this Jungle Beat website that tracks Google Trends and crypto apps in the App Store, things like that. And we're pretty quiet so far. You know, there's not a lot of activity based on the retail sentiment, let's say. I don't have the chart for it, but the crypto fear greed thing is at extreme greed. That's another just sentiment check. We also had potentially a test transaction in the Mt. Gox wallets. I don't know what exactly this is, but this has been at 0 for, you know, days and days and days and days and days. So I don't know what's going on there, but what made me check this is because some of the Mt. Gox seized Bitfinex coins have been moved, and apparently the US government isn't going to be liquidating these funds. They're going to be giving them back to victims. So I guess that means back to Bitfinex. Not really sure on the total picture there. But if you're looking for things that could anger price at this level, right? If you're looking to enter in some sort of 50x altcoin long with funding at infinity and potentially some dormant coins moving, now this is the time where things get weird, right? Websites go down, exchanges go down. Historically, we've seen hacked coins, not coins that have been seized, but just old hacked coins just move when everybody's not looking, sort of thing. So definitely be careful with leverage sizing up here, because with alts, you can blink and that's it. You're out of here. Stablecoin issuance has picked up a little bit, which is a good sign for alts. And if you're sidelined, depending on what you want to do as far as entries, I always feel like DCA is a good idea, because that way at least I have exposure to the market. I've been fully deployed for I don't know how long. So like, it's not a big deal for me, but I'm saying if people are asking like, what do I do? Not financial advice. Pick some key moving average, put some bids there, move those bids up every day or week or whatever, and then DCA, right? That's the best you can really do, or play these breakouts like I have been on leverage for Bitcoin, for ETH, for whatever else. But at least with the DCA, you have some exposure, because if you're completely sidelined but want to get in, you tend to get in at the worst times psychologically when things are way overheated and you just throw up your hands and you say, okay, I can't take it anymore. I got to get in. That's usually not a very advantageous entry. Looking at total 2 on USD, we are well through the weekly cloud here. Many alt USD charts look really good. So naturally today I'm going to talk about the BTC pairs, because most of those look like hot garbage. And I think it's just important to compare. You can trade alts on USD with leverage or not. You can trade it against BTC or not. But I think the last thing you want to be doing is just sitting in some spot alt that is continuing to get bled dry against Bitcoin. There's also some sort of high time frame golden cross on the 50, 200 or whatever on the USD side. So alts should do well-ish, but on a relative basis, they don't have an ETF. Will ETF money flow into alts? Probably not. Will retail and crypto native money flow into alts? Probably. So it's just something to think about timing wise. I think things are starting to look bad enough on some of these alts that there's a consideration for taking profit in Bitcoin positions and rotating that into alts. I'm not saying like a large percentage here, but to start nibbling, depending on where you think something like dominance is going to go. If you think dominance is going to hold at 60, find a ceiling at 60, maybe you want to start accumulating alts on the way there. If you think it's going higher, then you probably don't want to touch alts, but just something to consider, right? Because everybody thinks they want to bottom tick the thing and top tick the thing. That just doesn't usually end well for them. Total 2 BTC on the daily. This had looked like a potential diamond bottom, very much like ETH BTC. At this point, what you don't want to see during a diamond formation, you can kind of draw it mentally. What you don't want to see is a lower low. So what you'd want to see is lower lows to the maximum and then a series of higher lows. So this is not a great sign for total 2 BTC, which suggests to me bearish continuation. If you go to the weekly zoom way out, this could be headed for the next leg down when dominance hits 60, right? But maybe on the way there, depending on the alt, there are certain charts that look better than others. I always say I like buying strength, but I also like buying extreme weakness. Extreme weakness with a high time frame, multi-week bullish divergence is where I like to live. Some charts were there, some charts were not. But this is certainly continuously bearish here. Had a chance to recover a little bit, but logically to me with the ETFs, that's not going to happen. So looking at where this could go next, you could either measure this consolidation lower, or you can just sort of look, at the horizontals. So that's a level to watch, basically this level equivalent on the horizontal, which is quite a ways down still. So you have to keep that in mind. Now let's talk about some individual coins against BTC. ETH-BTC tried its darndest on a weekend to break out, and Bitcoin said no during the week, specifically the ETFs, really pushing ETH-BTC back down, which is what I expected. I expected the BTC inflows to overperform relative to ETH ETF speculation. For this diamond, we haven't made a lower low yet. That is a bearish engulfing candle on the weekly, so not super promising, but when diamonds are forming, they tend to be very volatile and look kind of gross like this, okay? So definitely don't want a lower low. If you get one, it's not the end of the world, but you definitely don't want a new multi-year low. So this could still play out, still needs tons of time. ETF stuff is still months away, still something to watch, but I don't think ETH is where you want to live at the moment. BNB looks okay. You know, most of these charts are already leaning bearish and then in some sort of range. And that's just not where I want to live. But again, if you want to look for lower lows, that makes more sense to me. Looking for a bull div, that makes more sense to me. Not seeing that here. Or some sort of reversal pattern. Not really seeing that here. Now you could argue the TKC clamp stuff on basically all these charts because they're just so oversold. But that tends to take a while to play out on the weekly. Sol BTC made an Adam and Eve inverted on the daily time frame, and it's just been all she wrote pretty much across the board for Bitcoin, for Sol, ETH. As this is in the weekly cloud, it's verboten, basically. You know, there isn't really a trade here, and you're probably waiting until Q3, Q4 for a realistic setup here. You've also got FTX stuff that Solana's still dealing with. And one way you can get trapped in a cycle is, let's say you did really well on Sol early on, a couple months ago. Certain types of alt people tend to just stay in the community and, like, you know, love the people and the devs and all that stuff, and that's fine. But that's generally not how things work. You know, generally it's pockets of strength, pockets of liquidity. First it was Sol, ETH was perking up a little bit. ETH stuff continues to look well relative to everything else. Bitcoin obviously dominating. So Sol can do fine later on, you know, but it's done very well leading up to this point. So just don't get trapped in the mindset. Fish where the fish are. If you're a locust, fly to the next alt. There's plenty of wheat in the patch or whatever that locusts eat in other alts. Ripple BTC almost back to the all-time low ranges. Not close to a price all-time low, but it's got an RSI almost at all-time lows. I wouldn't play this. I wouldn't touch this, but what tends to happen or has happened historically is a bounce somewhere down here. It's not for me, but if you're just trading the tech, I could see an argument for bidding like 600 sats or something, whatever that is. Or 10,000 other coins, maybe trade those instead. Cardano BTC had a bunch of bearish Kijun bounce taps a few weeks ago, and it got denied pretty hard. So again, a lot of this stuff probably needs another couple months, and we can see how it looked post-halving in 2020. It took a good long while for alts to catch a bid against Bitcoin. So we are probably set to see something very similar. Doge, an interesting one. This is at multi-month lows, multi-year lows, does have a multi-month bull div. There's no real pattern here. You know, it doesn't look as good as it did with this complex inverted head and shoulders before that breakout. There's a pretty big TKC clamp. Maybe there's a trade from here to 300. I do have a Doge long running, but I don't know if it's the best trade against Bitcoin. Doge USD certainly looks much better, as do many alts against USD, but just something to think about because historically, like a lot of this older altcoin crowd, they tend to just bleed for years, and then they have a week where they just catch up, and then they bleed again for years, right? So we're to the point now where the risk reward on catching a random pop might be worth it for some people. Just something to think about. AVAX falling out of the cloud, inverted Adam and Eve on the weekly. Not great. This will probably cross bearish. So it definitely tells you AVAX is not the place to be relative to BTC at the moment. Tron has done fairly well on the USD pair. It's certainly held its own against Bitcoin. It's not making lows here, but it's in a giant multi-year range, leaning bearish. So to me, the argument to sit in Tron over Bitcoin just isn't there. I would need to see a new higher high basically above 350 sats. So that's where I would set the alert on that one. Link still kind of in this consolidation hell down here. Maybe Adam and Eve, maybe eventual inverted head and shoulders in the next 6 months, but it needs some time. You know, the good news is it's not going to run away without you. You know, we're not post-halving yet, which is when alts do best. DOT looks like it's ready for all-time lows. This does not look like a chart that will be bullish anytime soon against Bitcoin. If we look at the low time frames on DOT, BTC, there was a head and shoulders here that I talked about a couple weeks ago that's slowly been playing out here. So the expectation is definitely bearish continuation there. I know a lot of people talking about Matic again because it's back above $1, or at least was above $1. And against the BTC pair, there is that TKC clamp possibility, but this does not look like a longable chart to me. It's just sort of drifting, lost in space, lost at sea. Not a bullish picture at all at lows down there. Uni BTC had a big move when the rev share proposal was brought forth, tapped the Kijun on the weekly, and that's kind of been it. So similar to a bullish move in a bullish trend, the mean reversion target is always on the chart. It would make sense to me if this tried to consolidate over the next 3 to 6 months, work its way into the cloud, and then have a better case for full-blown bullish reversal potentially. But as it stands here, not super promising in the moment. Apt BTC, this looks like a mixture of diamond bottom again, or head and shoulders at the bottom. I don't talk about this too much, but generally chart patterns are either reversals or continuation. Typically, you don't see continuation patterns at the bottom of a market. You don't see reversal patterns at the bottom of a market. You usually see reversals at the top or bottom, right? And then continuations with a long-standing trend. So in this case, it would be a bearish reversal pattern at the bottom of a bearish trend. It does happen. It doesn't really stop me ever from playing that pattern or recognizing that it's there, but it's not necessarily historically correct for the chart pattern purists. Anyway, if this gets into the cloud, I think that's the trade. I think here you just wait relative to BTC. STX BTC, one of the few that are actually above the weekly cloud. This chart continues to look really good. Doesn't even have a bear div here on this higher high, and it looks fine. If there's anything to sit in relative to BTC or add to a portfolio, for me, it would be that coin relative to all these other ones. It's Bitcoin layer 2, so that makes sense that it's doing well. Atom BTC also just not what you want to see. Just continuous drift. Nothing is more bearish than just slow bleed week after week. And this is close to all-time lows, I think. There's a pretty decent case for a bull div down here. So maybe as bearish as I am on this, it's worth taking a stab if it keeps going lower. But generally not something I like seeing. Definitely very bearish on that one. ETC BTC, just kind of flat, ranging down, not super happy. Much like Doge, this will have like a week or two after being down for a year. And maybe that was the move up a couple weeks ago. Maybe that's all we're going to get for the next 2 years. I don't know. Certainly doesn't look bullish. Has never really been above the weekly cloud. So that's always a sign to consider. Near BTC, again, a lot of these just need 3 to 6 months post-halving. The charts are probably going to look better. You're probably going to see reversal chart patterns more clearly. Here you've got some sort of inverted head and shoulders potential, right? But it needs time. It just needs time. So definitely not something you want to sit in relative to BTC. Filecoin, kind of like Apt, right? Kind of like DOT. Is this a head and shoulders at the bottom? Or is this a diamond bottom? It's trying to do something, right? I know there are a lot of people sitting in Filecoin. The best case would be just ranging. If this can continue to range for 3 to 6 months, that's a win. I think that's going to be tough, but that's something to watch for. Any lower low here, and you're not going to be happy if you're sitting in this relative to BTC, but I know the USD chart looks pretty decent. H-bar was one that probably looks better than most somehow. Maybe inverted head and shoulders, maybe some sort of triangle down here. It still needs like 3 to 6 months, right? But if I'm just poking around looking for stuff, something to think about. Not anything I would touch here. INJ has looked fine. Had the ascending triangle a few months ago. Pulling back now. Looks okay. I don't know if I'd touch it here, but I'd rather buy this than something that's crushing all-time lows. At least this had some sort of momentum relative to BTC. OPBTC looks pretty bearish to me. Probably needs a move all the way back down, potentially, to test that low. That's what I would wait for. If it's in the cloud, it's definitely a no trade for me. Render BTC, similar to INJ, has done really well over the past year relative to Bitcoin. Looks fine. I don't hate it. I'd rather hold this than something that's turbo bearish, certainly. It's got the AI narrative on its side. And of all the charts that I looked at for this video and in this video, this is probably the best looking chart against Bitcoin because it's not in a bull trend per se that's pulling back. It's not turbo bearish. It's not about to be bearish. It's in a multi-year pattern ascending triangle with a weekly cloud breakout. It's on the top of the range. It just needs a little bit to push it past those highs at the resistance. But if there's anything I would punt on, I would try to take a trade on, it'd be this, because this has a pattern that's about to be bullish, potentially. Your stop loss here would probably be any lower low, but anything above, what is that, 2,500 sats? And it's probably go time for fat BTC. I know it's done really well on the USD pair already, and it looks like it may, it might take 3 to 6 months, right? Like all this stuff, post-halving, that's in April, it's coming up. That may be when this breaks out, so it may take a little time, but it's something to think about on the weekly. TIA, sadly, has just absolutely gotten demolished here over the past couple weeks. Historically, this is what we kind of see. That's why when people ask me about airdrops or freshly listed coins, I just kind of roll my eyes. There's a ton of hype, a ton of momentum when they come out, and then they hit some natural level and just lose momentum. People take profit, VCs take profit, people get bored, and that's that. So I would wait for some sort of 4-hour bull div or something, because right now the RSI is quite angry. Definitely not anything I would touch at the moment. Maker BTC has held this trend, downward sloping channel, for a few years now, just kind of dead money relative to BTC. I know I always poo-poo these ranges, but they're very tradable if you watch them, if you're paying attention, right? I just tend not to care, but I know there are people that trade this and do that effectively. I would wait for anything above the weekly cloud. It's never really been above the weekly cloud against BTC. Rune in the cloud on the weekly, no bull div, just needs a ton of time to consolidate against Bitcoin. Algo's another one where, is this maybe a diamond eventually? Will this make a lower low? Probably worth just waiting a couple months to see. It did have a diamond up here. You can see this giant, almost looks like an inverted head and shoulders, but this giant thing that tried to be a diamond and just fell down, right? So if I was trading this now, I wouldn't want to see any lower lows, that's for sure. But I think it just needs time like everything else. Bonk has actually held up quite well, sadly, relative to the other stuff. The other stuff at least has some fundamental value, has some fundamental narrative and story. This is all just, casino nonsense, which is fine, but it's better looking than a lot of these charts out there. Do I think this is going to have some sort of resurgence pump? I don't think so. But if it can hold its lows for 3 to 6 months and the rotation sort of finds its way back around, maybe Bonk can do well once again. So overall, the ecosystem is doing quite well thanks to Bitcoin's strength. Alts need Bitcoin consolidation post-strength for alts to catch up a little bit, for capital to rotate around, for people to take profit into alts, for people to take profit and buy alts, right? That's going to take some time. So if you're an altcoin maxi, you definitely want to see BTC range here for a good long while, between 60 and 62. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.